Welcome to the Doom Scroll News Report here on Radio Taiwan International, where I, Amanda Stevens, and my co-host,
Anna Belinsky,
two writers, political by necessity, cover some of the biggest international news stories dominating our news feeds from the last week, or a little bit later, even. I'm Amanda Stevens, and this week we're tackling what's going on in Iran and how likely it is to make change, as well as sort of a follow-up to our previous discussion about what's been going on with North Korea and Russia by talking about their neighbors to the south, South Korea and China, who recently had a meeting. That was something that we wanted to talk about last time, but we kind of ran out of time because they were largely expunged by what happened in Venezuela.
Yeah.
As you may have noticed from our last episode, we had a lot to say.
Well, there is a lot to say on that topic. And I think we did the right thing, just dedicating a whole episode to it. And then we can save these other, also pretty big topics for this week.
Right. Very big. Very big. So in the middle of this, Hanna, how are you? I don't have another question. It's just kind of been, it's been a week for me.
I'm enjoying the weather, even though it seems not good that it's not cold in January. that does not bode well, but I have to confess it is really nice, and I've been bringing the boy out to just walk around, and he's been liking that.
Love it.
Oh yeah, a little bit of sunshine on his little bald head. It's very nice.
My cats have also been enjoying the sunshine, although so it was colder before. We have had to keep the heater on for one of my cats because he's ill and he can't be cold, and so I haven't been able to enjoy as much of the cold as I wanted to. I would have liked my apartment to be a little bit colder.
I think it'll cool down again. It will happen. And then everybody will catch a cold.
Again, as always happens. This is the cycle. Yeah. Cycle of Taiwan. All right, well, that's enough small talk. I wish we could do small talk for 25 minutes. But
unfortunately,
the world carries on.
We have to do big talk.
Yeah. Now, I kind of feel like my segments are on the verge of turning into a protest watch or war watch. But like we say often, this is really worth our time. Something that I think hasn't been getting enough press is the level of protests going on in Iran. Now, I'm not saying it's not being covered, but I do think that it is worth more press than it is getting. So, what is going on in Iran? Let me give you a little spark notes. The long story short is that the Iranian rial crashed. But Hannah, this blew my mind. When I say the rial crashed, what I mean is that $1 is worth over 1 million Iranian rials.
This is
on the chart.
It's like worthless. It's worthless. It is completely worthless.
This is like what happened in World War II Germany when people had wheelbarrows of money. Like, that's what this feels like to me.
It's nuts.
The BBC had a quote, which it seems like it's not consistent. It's always over 1 million reales for $1. And
God.
Literally, I would be upset too. I would be in the streets. I totally get it. So this original protest started in a market. I believe it was a bunch of shopkeepers who were just fed up on December 28th. And this, in conjunction with years of mistreatment and the economic impact of sanctions against Iran's economy, that's the kind of the spark notes of what made people so angry. And protests have been going on and expanded nationwide ever since, with confirmed protests in 187 cities and towns in all of the 31 Iran provinces. As of January 14th, over 18,000 protesters have been arrested as the government cracks down, with reports of a little bit over 2,400 protesters killed, along with 147 people affiliated with security forces and the government and 9 uninvolved civilians. Higher numbers have been reported, but not yet verified by sources. And the government is cracking down pretty hard. They shut down the internet on January 8th, although some information is still eking out. Apparently, people have Starlink, but unfortunately, the government is trying to find those, squash those as well.
Right.
They have also been on record as using water cannons, rubber bullets, and live ammunition to subdue protests. All the while, the regime seems to be intent on blaming foreign dissidents for inciting the violence, which the Iranian people are largely not having. But how much of this have you been able to keep up with, and how are you doing so?
So reporting has been really spotty on this, and I imagine the fact I can only read about it in English doesn't help.
Oh, yeah.
So although I've been catching headlines, One thing that I have noticed is that the number of protesters that are being reported as killed has varied widely.
Pretty
Some
widely.
sources, I saw up to 12,000. I was like, that can't be right. But it is, suffice it to say, a lot of people.
One, it's hard to tell because obviously there are people on the ground who are seeing big numbers, but we don't know whether or not those numbers are verified or where they're coming from.
Right.
And then the government, which is putting out numbers, is lowballing it.
Of course. They shut off the internet, like you said, and all these services as a way to inhibit protest activity and also accurate reporting of events. And I would say the biggest headlines that I've seen actually all have to do with the regime executing young protesters. One I saw was just a teenage girl, and another is this, I think, 25-year-old guy that they're going to make a show of publicly executing. So that's pretty harrowing, and I think their motivations for doing this are pretty obvious.
Right. I mean, it is, a lot of it has been the news that has kind of made it out past the sanctions.
Yeah.
And if you didn't know, there's no foreign journalists allowed inside Iran. And especially right now. And any independent Iranian journalists are consistently just arrested, persecuted, if hopefully just arrested, which sounds like a very low bar, and it is. And so we're kind of reliant on any news that people manage to squeak out. And then on top of that, you have to try to verify it, not to gaslight anybody who's living there, but when you're in the middle of a forest fire, it can be hard to tell how much of the forest is actually on fire.
No kidding.
So, of course, other headlines I've seen has been the foreign reaction to it. And by the foreign reaction to it, I mean
T-Rump.
The United States reaction to it. This hasn't escaped the notice of the Trump administration, who has threatened to intervene on multiple occasions, starting on January 2nd. And remember, these have been going since December 28th. So starting on January 2nd, Trump posted on social media in response to news of protester deaths that the U.S. was, quote, locked and loaded and ready to go, end quote, and would come to the rescue of protesters. Later, on the 13th, the U.S. president again encouraged protesters to take over their institutions, keep the names of killers because, quote, they will pay a big price, help is on the way, end quote. Between that, the U.S. threatened 25% tariffs on any countries doing business with Tehran, and as of the 14th, have said that Iranian forces are ready to negotiate unless they want to get beat up by us. His words, not mine. I didn't say beat up. I didn't choose that. But for their part, the Iranian counterparts have said that they are ready for war if attacked, but will negotiate if the negotiations are fair, or the terms are fair. And a lot of this discourse has been happening over social media. So bear that in mind as I continue this next question, including promises of help and all of these other things. Of course, Trump's social media has sort of been used as his policy platform. So given that the United States did actually strike Venezuela in the middle of this, and Syria, which I think is worth noting, that was a retaliatory strike, but is in the area. While these protests were going on, what do you think the odds are that Trump will make good on his threats of military action in Iran? And what could the consequences of those actions be?
Well, you just know that the American government writ large, not even just Trump, is probably foaming at the mouth to basically kick Iran while they're down. Yeah. But, lately he's been saying a lot of things about doing this and that, and I really don't know what he's going to do. And I get the feeling that the situation in Iran is so chaotic that they may not be sure how or when to act if they are going to. I wouldn't be surprised if they conducted a few airstrikes, but at the same time, and you mentioned this earlier, that would only feed into the narrative that the Islamic Republic is propping up, which is that the protests are actually coming from outside and not from their own country. The U.S. also doesn't really want Iranian forces biting back, which they will.
Definitely.
They're riled up right now. They definitely will. So I think as far as consequences go, it would only escalate things, for sure.
Now, worth mentioning that right before we came down to record, Trump has supposedly said that the killings in Iran are stopping and that there is no plan for executions.
Girl, I don't know anymore. I mean, I don't even know if he knows. I don't have a clue.
Yeah. And I mean, I am interested to see. I hope that there could be change. Analysts seem to be torn as well as to whether or not these protests will actually be able to bring about regime change. According to Reuters, Samia Nakhoul, this is 86-year-old Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. This is his 5th major uprising.
That's right.
Since 2009. And the most recent one, people probably remember. It happened in 2022 with the Women Life Freedom protests. Those were sparked by the killing of one woman not wearing her hijab. She was, but apparently not up to standard.
Not good enough for them.
Yeah. So the article points out that even if the regime does survive, this is coming at a time where they're much weaker than it has been for those other uprisings. And those did kind of weaken the current regime.
And Khamenei's only getting older.
He's 86 already.
Yeah, he's 86.
So there's the economy, which we just talked about, which is not good. That's not supportive. There's Iran's nuclear program, which has been set back. A lot of their proxy forces, or we believe to be their proxy forces, in the area, Hamas and the Houthis have suffered a lot of military losses over the last few years. Also, high-ranking members of the Iranian military have been killed in the last few years through military action in the area. So they're a lot weaker than they have been for these previous protest movements. Still, Nakhoul also says that to have any chance of real regime change, that the protests would have to last longer and inspire defections within the military and other higher ranks, which seem to kind of make up the glue of Khamenei's power. And at the moment, that doesn't seem likely.
So that's the thing. I have read that their regime is one of the most powerful in the world, in large part because their military, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, their police, all their law enforcement, their intelligence officers, everybody is really strongly united, no matter what. And they're really loyal to the regime, and they remain well-funded. So the Republic is still pretty structurally sound at the leadership level and at the military level, and that alone makes regime change very, very, very difficult.
Right. Do you think that it is like possible?
I think if it's going to be possible, then they're going to have to keep at it. And that's really tough because obviously protesting is not easy to do and not easy to sustain.
Especially when 18,000 people have already been arrested. They're doing public executions. They're using live fire.
So I don't think regime change is likely unless we see just an unprecedented level of participation by the Iranian public in these protests, and they have to keep at it, and it would have to draw in more people across all different kinds of groups, and they would have to stay unified, and that's just a really tall order.
You mentioning that it's going to be tough to get everybody to unite is also kind of part of the problem, because even if there were regime change, polling suggests that it's not really clear what would come next. Some interesting polling from The Conversation, which relies largely on anonymous internet resources, so is thought to be more accurate, points out in an article titled, "Iranians Agree More on Regime Change Than What Might Come Next," shows that thoughts on Iran's future are complicated. The majority of Iranians are pro-regime change, and the overwhelming majority even want a pro-democracy something. Over 89% voted in favor of a democratic system, kind of like nebulously, a democratic system. But there's growing support for the now exiled former Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. So in the latest poll, or one of their latest polls, about 1/3 were strongly in favor of Pahlavi, at least stepping in during a transitional period. 1/3 were strongly against it, and 1/3 had no opinion. However, something else that stuck with me was a poll asking which system people would prefer to the Islamic Republic, which is the name of the current system. And while it seems like most people are against another IR, almost 25% answered that they lacked the knowledge to choose an alternative to the IR. So if we assume these polls are representative, what could this mean in the case that there even was regime change as a result of these protests?
You know, I'm not really surprised at the responses because if you think about it, it just reflects what they know. And all that a lot of people have known is either the Islamic Republic or their Shah, their monarchy, the old monarchy. So even if you are pro-democracy in theory, if you don't really know what that will look like in your country in practice, then it's a dream, you know. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was regime change, which would be
I would be surprised.
Pretty
I would
crazy.
be surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if they did bring the old prince back as kind of an interim leader, because who else do they have? You know, that's really the big question. Who is going to emerge as the next leadership figure?
Yeah.
It's just all up in the air.
It's true that at the moment there is no true
no plan.
unified leadership, and a lot of these protests started from an economic place and then quickly turned on the regime as blame. But right now we just don't really know what's going on, and we don't know where they're going to go. Things are changing quickly. I mentioned that we had an update right before this, and there will probably have been updates by the time that this goes out. But I guess that I would end by saying this is worth your time. Sort of as a follow-up to talking about North Korea and Russia, I wanted to talk about what happened between South Korea and China, which, while good, feels sort of less meaningful to me than I had expected when I heard that they were going to meet. And maybe that's a me problem. I know that might be I don't know what I expected out of it when I tried to interrogate those feelings.
What does it take to get you excited these days, Amanda?
Oh, girl.
How much blood?
You know, honestly, Dairy Queen coming back to Taiwan did get me excited.
Hey, okay.
That did work. Anyway, back to South Korea, China, and countries. So I think that it's natural that the new South Korean president, Lee Jae-myung, would want to warm ties between China and South Korea. This was part of his platform. And because China is or was a huge market for South Korean companies, like the rest of the world, they've also been icing out South Korean entertainment since South Korea agreed to let the U.S. build a missile defense system on their soil, which China sees as a threat. They're probably right. However, another reason that they're likely to want to shore up support is because China is one of North Korea's biggest supporters as well. They're kind of playing the field in that regard. It's both China and Russia's support of North Korea, which has largely ruined U.S. and UN bids to toughen sanctions on the country for their missile testing. So how much do you think China's relationship with North Korea factored into the meeting between Xi Jinping and Lee Jae-myung?
You know, it's tricky, isn't it? It's like a square of opposing and yet also common interests between China and North and South Korea and Japan and the United States. So they are really in a complicated spot. And China has a vested interest in keeping the Korea situation stable because just based on geographical proximity, anything happening on the peninsula would cause a humanitarian crisis that would flow into China just because they're right there. And South Korea, I'm sure, realizes this. So even though they're hosting the U.S. military, which China no likey, they have to play both sides here, knowing that China is also North Korea's main buddy. And that's kind of their best bet at sort of stabilizing the situation from the other side.
Right. It's kind of everybody walking a tightrope. And speaking of tightropes, are we getting better or worse at transitions?
I don't know. It depends on who you ask, I suppose.
So
having too much fun with it.
We know that Japan definitely came up, which is something that South Korean President Lee definitely was, I have to imagine, kind of tiptoeing about. Why is that a sticky situation? In case you haven't noticed, somehow has soured since China, in my opinion, overreacted to Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Takaichi's remarks about Japan using its military to stop a blockade on Taiwan.
They've been crashing out for like weeks on
I
this.
do think it's worth noting. Doesn't pop up a lot in the reporting. She was responding to questions from the legislature on that instance. So it wasn't just off the cuff.
No, it was not unprompted.
But to that end, I don't think that China was pleased with her to begin with. We
not.
discussed her. She's a lot more of a hardliner than previous prime ministers have been.
She is.
And she's definitely a lot more for bolstering Japanese military. So while it's likely in the interest of South Korea to prioritize ties with Japan and the United States for defense reasons, all of Korea has a complicated relationship with them. So I mention it because this is also something that Xi Jinping himself highlighted over the trip, with the BBC reporting that she directly commented on both their countries' past of resisting Japanese militarism. So how do you think the relationship with Japan played into this meeting?
You know, everybody kind of has beef with the way Japan behaved during World War II, you know, and they haven't exactly owned up to it.
There's also the Sino-Japanese War.
Sure, there's many things. That's the problem when you've been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. You know, you're gonna make some enemies, and it's gonna keep coming up. That said, I don't think this is going to be the main stick that she is going to reach for. You know, I just don't think
for the stick and carrot.
Or stick or carrot. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think this is really like his big chip, although I'm sure he's, you know, keeping it in his back pocket.
Yeah.
I think probably the U.S. is the bigger confounding factor in the situation. Although, like I said, it's like a square, you know, it's even more complicated than a triangle.
Right. And that is kind of something that we bring up occasionally, but is hard to really underscore. The relationships in the Southeast and in Northeast Asia are very complex and really kind of complicated by history.
Historically informed,
recent history, and current military entanglements. So getting to what actually did happen. The leaders did meet. They did not end up releasing a joint statement, which is a little bit unusual for this kind of meeting if you don't usually follow this type of news. Typically, the leaders will meet up and then give a joint statement saying, we've agreed on these different things.
Right.
But they did sign some trade deals on technology, trade, transportation, and environmental protection, discussing typical South Korean giants like Hyundai and Samsung. And the foreign minister of China also purportedly signed some deals pertaining to the entertainment industry. So maybe there will be some thawing on the soft block of K-dramas and music into China that I mentioned earlier. But what do you think actually came of this meeting?
I think this was more of a soft power play. And how effective that is in like overall diplomatic relations, it's hard to say, but you know, it's better than nothing, that's for sure. And they have always been economically like very reliant on one another. So it's important to keep that avenue open, especially now that the US has kind of become a little more unreliable. And I do think it's part of a broader trend, unfortunately, in the world and America's old allies kind of turning to China.
Kind of looking for an alternative.
Yes, because America's just become kind of, well, we don't know what to expect from the U.S. sometimes anymore. So it feels like China kind of took the opportunity to get in a little bit cozier with South Korea in this regard, just as all part of this broader picture of everybody turning more to China, warming to China more.
Well, and I think, honestly, that when I say I was disappointed, interrogating that within myself, I do think that's kind of more of like what this was about. These guys aren't going to become friends.
Right.
They're not going to be friends overnight. And I think it's also kind of a reality that both South Korea, who is interested, like I said, in maintaining, honestly, stronger ties with Japan and the United States, and China, who is interested in not that.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
And I think on some level, the leaders meeting, they kind of have this agree to disagree for now sentiment.
Right. And that's probably why no joint statement was
released. Joint statement. Yeah. They were like, should we say anything? And they're like, we don't really agree on that much, actually. Fine. It's okay. Let's just sign some papers.
Exactly.
We'll take selfies, which did happen.
We'll take and they made some, he made some funny joke about how there's like a back door on the device.
Good? Yeah.
Which I think is very self-aware and actually funny of Xi Jinping. I'll give him that.
Right. The fact that they were like, look at this Chinese. What
we're going to spy
Huawei.
on you.
It's a Huawei. He's like, we could put software in that. Anyway, I guess that's it for today's news report. So a quick reminder that you can find all our referenced articles in the show notes for today's episode. I'm Amanda Stevens.
I'm Hannah Belinsky.
And thanks for joining us on air today. Tune in tomorrow for more programs by Radio Taiwan International. And in the meantime, remember to stop scrolling and touch grass. We'll see you next week.